coming up on Spectrum News.
And history has unfortunately repeated itself again in the case of Daniel Prude.
Protesters in the city of Rochester demanding what they call justice after a grand jury cleared the officers involved in Daniel Prude's death of any criminal charges. Tonight, local leaders react to the news and the call to action that some are making. This is Spectrum News. I'm Casey Bortnick. Your full Weather on the One's forecast is coming up in just a bit, but first, your top story. And happening right now in downtown Rochester, let's give you a live look at Interstate 490 in the downtown area, where protesters have blocked off the eastbound lane of the I-490, dozens holding signs. This, of course, in response New York Attorney General Letitia James' announcement that a grand jury has decided not to indict the officers involved in the death of Daniel Prude. The protests have been happening all across the city this evening, and you can see this group of protesters had marched their way through the downtown area, through Main Street, headed right for the highways. We heard Philip Boudreau tell us a little bit earlier right here on Spectrum News. Those protesters made their way onto the highway until police finally moved in and decided to cut them off and kind of route them off. If I can kind of see here, you can see traffic is starting to move once again. Police are doing their best to keep the protesters safe from the traffic that's making its way through. But once again, the protesters taking to the streets, not only to the streets of the city of Rochester, but also to the highway as well, to make their voices heard and really to send an unmistakable message that they are really not satisfied with this decision by the grand jury. Either was the Attorney General Letitia James. Many there calling for what they call justice in the wake of this decision, and we'll of course keep an eye on this in the city of Rochester as these protesters continue to move throughout the city. We'll check back in with Philip Boudreau a little bit later, live right here on Spectrum News Rochester. For most of the day Tuesday, word circulated around Rochester that Attorney General Letitia James would be here to deliver the decision in the Prude investigation. Then, late in the afternoon, all the speculation was put to rest with a news conference at Anon Missionary Baptist Church. Our news reporter Wendy Wright was there for that announcement.
As the Attorney General of the state of New York walks to the podium at Anon Missionary Baptist Church, she does not bring the news she had hoped to.
We presented the strongest case possible, but today, the grand jury decided not to indict any police officer on charges related to Daniel Prude's death.
There will be no criminal charges against the officers involved in the events surrounding the death of Daniel Prude.
We made every attempt to demonstrate the facts, but ultimately we have to respect the decision.
7 police officers were suspended several months after Daniel Prude died after his police encounter on a cold winter night last March. The 41-year-old's family had called for mental health assistance.
I know that the Prude family, the Rochester community, and communities across the country will rightfully be disappointed by this outcome.
The AG announced that she will pursue a multifaceted approach to address issues that she says prevented holding officers accountable when they improperly use deadly force. James is also calling for grand jury reform.
Grand jury secrecy rules should be relaxed. The public deserves to know what transpired behind closed doors.
James's efforts may start to open those doors. Within hours of making that statement, the Attorney General reports that a judge granted her motion to unseal and publicly release the grand jury minutes related to the investigation of Prude's death. James says as soon as the judge authorizes it, her office will release those proceedings. And in keeping with transparency, she released a comprehensive report on the events surrounding the death of Daniel Prude.
Despite the decision from the grand jury, Letitia James says she has some serious concerns about the actions of the Rochester Police Department, and she is issuing some recommendations to the RPD to address those concerns.
Those recommendations include calling on police, dispatchers, and EMS responders to undergo training to recognize the symptoms of excited delirium syndrome and to respond to it as a serious medical emergency, as this is something Daniel Prude was coping with.
The officers who responded on March 22nd knew that Mr. Prude was experiencing this mental health crisis. Yet the officers who ultimately restrained Mr. Prude were largely unfamiliar with how to handle this type of medical emergency.
The Attorney General says her heart aches for the Prude family.
And I'm committed to effecting the change that is so desperately needed. And I promise you that I will be unshakable in my efforts to see it through.
In Rochester, Wendy Wright, Spectrum News.
Rochester City Council President Loretta Scott and Vice President Willie Lightfoot are calling on the RPD to pursue disciplinary action against the officers involved in Daniel Prude's death, saying, quote, "We must continue the efforts in our community to reform our public safety system and ensure that we create a system that values human life and recognizes and responds appropriately to situations involving individuals in need of mental health services." Congressman Joe Morelli responding to the decision, saying current policies just aren't working. Morelli tells us the new legislation needs to be passed to increase law enforcement accountability. He also says police training methods should be reevaluated and mental health services should be improved. Morelli says in part, quote, "The challenges we face are not unsolvable, and we owe it to Daniel Prude and the countless victims like him in communities across our nation to take decisive action to solve them." The head of the United Christian Leadership Ministry reacting to the decision, calling the grand jury system secretive and outdated. Reverend Lewis Stewart says a transformation is needed in the criminal justice system, including the grand jury. He tells us the public doesn't know what's going on when investigations are handed to the grand jury.
One thing I disagree with what the AG said is we need to respect the decision of the grand jury. No, I do not respect the decision of the grand jury, because by them failing to charge these police officers with homicide, they disrespected the life of Daniel Prude and they disrespected his memory.
Now, Letitia James did announce that a judge granted her motion to unseal the grand jury minutes, and she says as soon as it's authorized, she will do so. Reverend Stewart also tells us protesters should remain nonviolent but continue to stand up against injustice, as he put it. Rochester Mayor Lovely Warren holding a news conference on Tuesday calling for changes to better vaccinate underserved communities in Rochester. She says data shows that the coronavirus is affecting predominantly black and brown communities more than any other, and that goes for vaccinations as well. The mayor is asking the state for a 2-week extension of dedicated access to the St. Paul Street mass vaccination site for residents in underserved zip codes. After that, a commitment of 30% of future vaccine supply for underserved populations. And she is calling on residents to get signed up for a vaccine. You can visit the state website, mieligible.covid19vaccinehealthny.gov. You can also call 1-833-697-4829. Libraries and art centers in the city will also host registration stations to assist residents in signing up for the vaccine. Stay tuned after Weather on the Ones at 11 minutes and 41 minutes into the hour for those locations. Health officials in Genesee, Orleans, and Wyoming counties have sent a letter to the governor requesting him to designate a regional vaccination center in the area. Health officials say they want Governor Cuomo to designate Genesee Community College as a regional vaccination center. They tell us having a vaccination center within a 30-minute commute would help ensure rural communities aren't left behind in getting vaccinated. Health officials also tell us if designated, GCC would be able to vaccinate more than 2,000 people a day. Monroe County reporting 16 new COVID-19 related deaths, these happening between December 31st and February 4th. The county also reporting 126 new cases on Tuesday. It averages 139 new cases daily with an average positivity rate of 2.1%. 218 people in the Finger Lakes region are in the hospital, with 63 of them in an ICU. Some good news for college students in the SUNY Athletic Conference. They will have a spring season this year. The SUNY Chancellor visited SUNY Oswego on Tuesday to make that big announcement. Baseball, softball, lacrosse, tennis, track and field will all resume starting March 20th. The conference will be split into East and West regions to limit travel, and fans aren't allowed at games. Student athletes will also be tested within 3 days of games, and they're required to wear masks except during competition.
Me and my teammates and all the athletic community are beyond excited for this opportunity to get the chance to play this semester. With me being a senior, it was kind of tough last year, not being able to get a chance to play.
Now, the Chancellor says there is a chance the season will be suspended if positivity rates rise. Happy 200th birthday to Monroe County. The county kicking off its year-long bicentennial celebration on Tuesday. Monroe County says it's forming a bicentennial committee to plan events to help celebrate throughout this year. County residents can stay up to date on the different events by following the committee on Facebook and on Twitter.
Where we came from, we're going to acknowledge our struggles and successes and look to the future with hope and determination. So the actions that we take today are going to ensure our descendants see this county rise to even greater heights. And our next 100 years starts today.
A Livingston County woman received ADT's highest honor after helping to save a family from a fire hundreds of miles away. It was an emotional moment Tuesday as Heather Madania met the family she saved in Missouri. Fire broke out in their home with 5 children sleeping inside, including one who was in the same room as the fire. Madania says that she saw the alarms go off from ADT's monitoring center in West Henrietta and rushed into action, calling emergency services. The company honored her with its Lifesavers Award.
Temps made it again into the upper 30s on Tuesday afternoon. A lot of snow melt and, of course, wet pavement as a result. A lot of road spray around overnight and for that Wednesday morning commute. But basically, we do have dry weather with a breeze and even partly cloudy skies overnight. Little bit of sun Wednesday, probably not a whole lot of that. It will be blustery at times, especially behind a cold front that will arrive with a few rain showers during the afternoon. Winds gusting 30 to 35 miles per hour, but temps will peak in the upper 40s to around 50. By the evening, though, many of us will be back into the 30s. Colder, low 30s coming up for Thursday and Friday. Those 2 days look fairly uneventful, though on Thursday, a couple of stray flurries are going to be possible. Really no snow of consequence over the next several days. Now, our Wednesday forecast, temps starting off around the freeze point. Again, clouds will have the upper hand. Winds fairly light early, but notice how they really start to pick up as we go through the afternoon into the evening. Highs in the mid to upper 40s, and then temps dropping back into the 30s for many of us as we go into the evening hours. Now, for Thursday, low 30s will just about do it. Look for partial sun, still breezy. Again, an odd flurry or two. Friday looking dry and snow-free. Temps back up to near 40. Into the 40s for the weekend. It looks like a few rain showers likely Saturday and perhaps some on Sunday. That's kind of a tough call. I'll be back to talk more about that with the 7-day forecast in less than 10 minutes.
We're going to take a quick break, but first, here are the city library branches as well as our centers where you can go to get help registering for a vaccine appointment. We'll be right back.